They say family is supposed to protect you when the world turns its back. They say blood is thicker than water, but they never say what happens when the blood you poured your life into stands up in court and calls you a thief. When my husband died, and my daughter lost her job, I opened my door without hesitation. She needed help, she said. Mom, I just need you to watch the kids until I get back on my feet. So I did. 1 year turned to 3. 3 turned to 12. I wiped runny noses, sat in cold bleachers at their games, packed lunches when my daughter was too tired or too busy. I did it because they were my babies too. Because that's what family does. Or so I thought. Now I'm 68. My back aches when I bend down to tie my grandson's shoes, and my own daughter has decided I owe her. She's suing me, claiming I owe her unpaid babysitting wages for all those years. When the papers came in the mail, I thought it was a mistake. A cruel joke, but it's real. She's real. The girl I once carried through night terrors now calls me a burden, a liar, a fraud. Some family secrets are about cheating hearts. Mine is about a daughter who turned my love into a weapon. And the court date is next month. They say a mother's job is never done, but they don't tell you that sometimes it's not a job at all. It's a promise you make in the dark, when the world feels too heavy for the ones you love to carry alone. When George died, I thought my life was over too. 42 years of marriage, the good years, the bad, the in-between years we never talked about. I buried him on a Tuesday under a sky so blue it felt like an insult. People brought casseroles I couldn't eat, said things they didn't mean. You're strong, Carol. You'll get through this. I didn't feel strong. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides with a rusty spoon. The house felt too big, the bed too wide. The chair across from mine at the kitchen table stayed empty, mocking me every morning when I poured coffee for one. Then my daughter came home. Rachel was always my wild one. Smart, beautiful, too quick for her own good. She got married young, 19, big white dress, promises that tasted like sugar and turned to ash. He left when the twins were 2, said he couldn't do this forever. Like family was a sentence he never agreed to serve. I remember the night she came to my door, snow clinging to her coat, mascara smeared like bruises under her eyes. She had the boys in tow, Ben and Mason, sleepy and sticky-faced, wrapped up in blankets that smelled like stale French fries and cheap detergent. I don't know where else to go, Mom, she said. Her voice cracked on Mom, like she was 15 again and caught smoking behind the garage. I didn't ask questions. I just stepped aside. Those first nights, the house didn't feel so empty anymore. The boys' giggles bounced off the walls like music. I dug George's old train set out of the attic, the one he swore he'd pass down someday. We spread the tracks across the living room floor, my knees popping every time I crawled after them. Rachel slept a lot. At first I thought it was the exhaustion, single motherhood, grief piled on top of betrayal. She'd come down for coffee, her hair a mess, eyes red-rimmed, and I'd kiss her cheek like I could fix it all. I'll stay until I figure things out, she said. I nodded. As long as you need. 1 month turned to 3. 3 turned to a year. I cashed out George's small pension to cover groceries, new school clothes, braces when Ben's teeth came in crooked. I didn't think of it as sacrifice. I thought of it as love. When the boys were 4, Rachel got a job at the diner on Route 9. She came home smelling like coffee and grease, her shoes worn through at the heels. I kept the boys fed, bathed, tucked into bed with warm milk, and the same bedtime story George used to read Rachel. Sometimes she'd peek in their room, her face soft in the glow of the hallway light. I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom. And I'd whisper back, you'll never have to find out. By the time they started school, the routine was second nature. I packed lunches with peanut butter and jelly cut into neat triangles. I sat in tiny metal bleachers, cheering until my voice cracked at Little League games. I pinned ribbons on homemade costumes for Halloween parades. Rachel missed a lot of it. Double shifts at the diner turned into side gigs, hair appointments she never paid for, weekends out with men she never introduced me to. I didn't judge. God knows I'd done my share of looking the other way for people I loved. When the twins turned 10, the school nurse called me one afternoon. Mason had broken his arm on the playground. I left a roast in the oven, coat half-buttoned, panic clawing at my chest. When I got to the ER, he was brave, too brave for a boy, his sighs, tears biting at the corners of his eyes. Rachel showed up hours later. She smelled like beer. Her lipstick was smudged at the edges, a ghost of who she used to be. She didn't say sorry. She just signed the forms I'd already filled out. That night, when I tucked Mason into bed, he pressed his face into my shoulder and whispered, "Don't ever go away, Nana." I kissed the top of his head, breathing in the scent of little boy shampoo and antiseptic. "I'm not going anywhere, baby. I promise." I wish I'd known how heavy that promise would feel 12 years later. People asked, sometimes quietly, politely, like they were testing the edge of a knife, "When is Rachel going to get back on her feet? Does she help you with bills?" I'd wave them off. Asterisk. "She's trying. It's not easy, you know. Times are hard." Truth is, the only thing that felt hard was my bones when I bent to tie a shoelace or chase Mason down the driveway. My knees ached in the winter, my hands stiffened in the mornings, but I kept going. Because what else does a mother do when her child still calls her Mom, like she's too small to stand on her own? Then came the night that changed everything. I'd made spaghetti the boys' favorite. Ben was at the table, earbuds in, mouthing along to a song I'd never heard. Mason was playing some game on his phone, feet propped up on George's old chair. Rachel came in late, cheeks flushed, keys jingling in her hand like a dare. She dropped her purse on the counter, ignoring the plates I'd kept warm for her. "You're home early," I said. I meant it as an invitation. She heard it as an accusation. "Don't start, Mum." I bit my tongue. Saturday down with my tea, fingers trembling around the mug. "We need to talk," she said, eyes flicking to the boys. Asterisk. Later. I nodded, dread curling in my stomach. I thought maybe she'd met someone new. Maybe she was moving out. Maybe she'd found her own place after all these years. I should have known better. When the boys went to bed, Rachel poured herself a glass of wine, my wine, and stood by the sink, swirling it like she was on the edge of a toast. "I talked to a lawyer," she said, and just like that, the bottom dropped out of my world. I laughed. I swear I did. A short, sharp bark that made my ribs ache. "A lawyer? For what?" She didn't laugh back. Her eyes were cold, colder than I'd ever seen them. "I've been talking to him about the kids. About back pay. For all the babysitting." I stared at her. I felt the room tilt under me, the edges of my vision turning soft. "What do you mean, back pay?" "Rachel, I didn't charge you for watching my own grandchildren." She cut me off with a flick of her hand. "That's not how the court sees it, Mom. You said yourself you were helping me while I got on my feet. But it's been years. You're basically my live-in nanny. And that has value." "Value?" I whispered. Asterisk. "I gave you my life, Rachel. I gave them my life." She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She just sipped her wine, eyes glittering in the kitchen light. "The lawyer says I can claim it as unpaid wages. Back wages, child support, basically." My throat burned with the things I wanted to say. What about every night I sat up with them when you didn't come home? Every lunch I made? Every dollar I pulled from your father's pension? She shrugged. Asterisk. "You did that because you wanted to. No one forced you." In that moment, I saw her not the girl who scraped her knees on the driveway, who cried in my lap when her prom dress didn't fit, who pressed my hand to her belly the first time she felt the twins' kick. I saw her as she was now my own flesh and blood, standing in my kitchen, deciding I was worth $1 amount she could take to court. That night, I lay awake in George's old spot in the bed, staring at the ceiling, counting every crack like it might give me an answer. But there was nothing up there but shadows and the echo of my promise. "I'm not going anywhere, baby, I promise." They say a mother's job is never done. What they don't tell you is how it feels when your own child hands you the bill. They say you can't put a price on love, but my daughter found a way. The letter came 2 weeks after Rachel's drunken confession by the kitchen sink. I thought maybe it was an empty threat, something she said just to scare me into keeping my mouth shut, to remind me who really ran this house. But there it was, shoved between the gas bill and a coupon booklet I'd never use, an envelope stamped with a return address for her lawyer. McAllister and Green Family Law. My hands shook so badly I had to sit down at the table to slit it open. The letter was written in polite, careful language, the way lawyers do when they're gutting you but want you to bleed quietly. "We are writing to inform you that our client, Miss Rachel Thomas, is pursuing a claim for unpaid childcare services rendered by you in the amount of $82,600, plus interest. Bashuar, Liubei. My knees went cold just seeing the number in black ink on crisp paper. It felt like someone had taken every sandwich I'd packed, every story I'd read, every scraped knee I'd kissed, and stacked them up on a scale with a price tag. I read it twice, then a third time, hoping I'd misunderstood, but the words didn't change. This matter will be pursued in family court should a settlement not be reached within 30 days. 30 days. 30 days to find a way to pay my own child for raising her children. 30 days to figure out whether to beg, to fight, or to run. When the boys came home from school that afternoon, I must have looked like a ghost. Mason dumped his backpack by the door, sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. "Nana, you okay?" I folded the letter under my palm like it was poison. "I'm fine, baby. Just tired." That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe. The creak of the rafters, the hum of the fridge, the soft whisper of the boys giggling in the next room over oblivious to the storm rolling toward us. I thought about George. About how he'd spent 42 years fixing everything: the dripping faucet, the sputtering lawnmower, the mortgage payment we were always 1 month behind on. He'd have known what to say to Rachel. Or maybe he wouldn't have. Maybe that's why I missed him so much right then. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed I was standing in a courtroom so cold I could see my breath. Rachel sat at the plaintiff's table, hair pulled back tight like she used to for job interviews. She didn't look at me, just tapped her nails on a stack of papers taller than I was. The judge asked me what my defense was. "I loved them," I said, my voice echoing off the marble walls. "I did it because I loved them." The judge banged his gavel anyway. The next morning, I found the letter where I'd left it, a greasy coffee ring bleeding into the signature line. I wanted to tear it up, set fire to it, toss the ashes in the garden, but I didn't, because part of me needed to see it, needed to feel how real it was. Rachel didn't say a word about it. She breezed through the kitchen before work, humming under her breath, phone pressed to her ear. I thought maybe she'd apologize, or explain. But when she looked at me, her eyes were cold and flat like I was the tenant and she was the landlord waiting for back rent. 3 days later, Mrs. Faber stopped me on the sidewalk. She's lived 3 houses down since George and I bought this place in 1974, the kind of woman who never missed a bake sale or a chance to poke her nose where it didn't belong. She leaned over the garden fence, one gloved hand still clinging to her pruning shears. "Carol, I heard the most peculiar thing. It's probably nonsense, but is it true Rachel's got a lawyer?" My mouth went dry. "Where'd you hear that?" She gave that little shrug that says, "Don't blame me, it's what people are saying. My cousin's daughter works at McAllister and Green. She saw your name on a file, said it's something to do with family wages." I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced a laugh that scraped my throat raw. "Just a misunderstanding, Margaret. You know how things get twisted." But I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of pity. And worse, curiosity. I knew by supper the entire block would know my daughter was dragging me to court, and they'd all wonder the same thing. What did Carol do to deserve it? A week later, Mason heard something he shouldn't have. He came into the kitchen after school, his little face pinched tight. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "Mom says you're trying to steal money from her." My knees gave out. I sank onto the step stool by the fridge. "Baby, that's not true. You know I'd never." But he just shook his head, hair flopping over his eyes. "She said you want to make us leave." "No," I whispered. "No, sweetheart, that's not." But his eyes were wet now, lip trembling. "Why would you do that, Nana?" It felt like someone took a knife to my belly, twisting it with every word that came out of his mouth. I reached for him. He pulled back. That night, I tried to talk to Rachel. She was sitting on the porch, smoking a habit she'd sworn she'd quit after the twins were born. The glow of the cigarette tip flared bright every time she drew it to her lips. "You told Mason I'm trying to kick you out?" She didn't look at me, just flicked ash over the railing. Asterisk. "Well, aren't you? If you don't pay what you owe, we can't stay here." That's what the lawyer said. I stared at her, my daughter, my baby girl, the one I rocked to sleep through every nightmare she ever had. "What happened to you, Rachel?" She laughed, but there was no joy in it. What happened? You, Mom. You always said you'd take care of everything, but you never planned for what would happen when you couldn't. I opened my mouth to argue, to remind her how many years I'd kept the lights on, the bellies full, the homework done, the tears dried. But the words felt small in my throat. Like saying them out loud would make me look pathetic instead of proud. So I went inside, locked the door behind me, and stood in the hallway listening to the house creak, wondering how something so full of life could feel so empty. They say family always finds its way back to each other. But when your child hands you a bill for every sleepless night you gave them, maybe the road back doesn't exist at all. They say the worst part of betrayal is the moment you realize it didn't happen overnight. It's been growing roots under your feet for years. I used to think if I just kept my head down, kept loving them the way a mother should, the world would stay upright. But roots grow in the dark, and mine were already rotting. I sat up all night after Mason looked at me with those big, damp eyes that used to light up when I walked into a room. Now they flickered away, like my shadow was something to be afraid of. By morning, I knew I couldn't fight this alone. I pulled out the old phone book from the kitchen drawer, the same drawer where George used to toss spare screws and folded receipts. My hands trembled as I flipped through the thin, yellow pages, my finger tracing the list. Family law, elder law, mediation. I didn't even know what I needed. What do you call it when your own child turns you into a debtor in the house you built for her to come home to? I dialed 3 numbers before I found someone who would even take my call. Her name was Heather, a young voice, too cheerful for what I was about to lay at her feet. I need to know if my daughter can really do this, I said, my voice cracking in the middle like old paint. Heather was quiet for a moment. Then she asked me to explain. I told her everything. George's pension, the years of school drop-offs and dinners and Halloween costumes, the nights I lay awake on the couch waiting for Rachel's key to rattle the front door. Heather didn't interrupt, just listened. I imagined her sitting at her big oak desk, pen tapping against her notepad, trying to puzzle out how to tell a 68-year-old grandmother that the law didn't care how much you loved your family. When I finished, my throat felt raw. Could she win? I asked. Heather sighed. It depends. If she can prove there was an expectation of payment, or if there was ever an agreement, even implied. There wasn't. I said it too fast. Too certain. Wasn't there? Had I ever said, I'll help you until? Had she ever said, you'll get paid for this? Of course not. But people twist words. Lawyers twist them better. Heather said she'd take my case. That I needed to start gathering anything, calendars, notes, even photos that showed the boys living as part of my household, not hers. Like a scrapbook could save me from my own child. I hung up feeling heavier than before. I wanted to call Rachel, beg her to come to her senses. But every time I picked up the phone, my fingers froze. What would I say? Baby, please stop. Don't ruin me. She'd just say, it's your fault, Mom, you let this happen. Maybe she'd be right. By the next weekend, the neighborhood was buzzing. Mrs. Harris, yes, that Mrs. Harris, the one who sees all, knows all, stopped me outside my mailbox. Her voice was syrupy sweet, but her eyes glittered like ice chips. I heard Rachel's taking you to court, Carol. Lord, I hope you two can settle it like family. It's such a shame when families fight so dirty, isn't it? She didn't wait for me to answer. She just leaned in closer, dropping her voice. People talk, you know. They say maybe you pushed her too hard. Maybe you always wanted to raise those boys like they were your own. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I pressed the letter to my chest, the grocery coupons fluttering away in the breeze. They're my grandchildren, Margaret. They're mine. She just gave me that look, the one that says, bless your heart, when they really mean, poor fool. At home, the tension thickened like old soup left on the stove too long. Mason avoided my eyes. He'd come home, drop his backpack, scurry up the stairs to play his games with the door shut tight. Ben, the older one, sweet Ben, changed in ways that broke me more than any lawyer's letter could. He'd always been my helper, setting the table without asking, carrying my laundry basket down the basement stairs so I wouldn't slip. Now he stayed out late with friends. When he came in, he'd grunt a hello, not, hi Nana, not love you too, just a grunt. One night, I caught him standing at the fridge, rummaging for soda. I tried to break the silence. How was school? He shrugged. Fine. I pressed on, my voice too bright. Your birthday's coming up. Maybe we can have a little party, just us. Maybe I'll make that chocolate cake you like. He slammed the fridge door so hard the magnets rattled. Don't bother. Mom says we'll probably move out soon anyway. I felt the world tilt. Move out? He grabbed his can of soda, popped the tab with a hiss. He didn't look at me when he said it. Mom says once we win, we'll have money for a better place. She says you're gonna lose the house. He said win. Like I was the enemy in some game I didn't even know we were playing. That night I sat at the kitchen table until dawn. I spread out old photo albums, Ben as a toddler, Mason in his Halloween cowboy hat, Rachel curled up next to me on Christmas morning, her hair a tangled halo. I pressed my fingers to the photos like I could reach through and pull us all back to that moment. Back when love was enough. A week later, Heather called me back. She asked me to meet her at her office. It's better if we go over this in person, Carol. I pulled on my good coat, the navy one, with the little velvet collar George bought me for our anniversary in '89. The lining was torn at the hem. I stitched it up that morning, just so I wouldn't look like a woman falling apart. Heather was kind, too kind. She poured me stale coffee in a paper cup and slid a stack of forms across the table. We'll fight this, but you need to be ready. She could push for you to sell the house to pay the judgment if she wins. Do you have any other assets? I laughed. A dry, bitter sound. I've got the house and George's old watch. That's it. Heather didn't smile. She just patted my hand, a cold, lawyer's pat that said, I feel bad, but not bad enough to do this for free. On the way home, the sky cracked open with rain. I sat at a stop sign 3 blocks from my house, windshield wipers smearing the world into a watery mess. In the driveway, Rachel's car was parked crooked, as if she'd rushed home to hide from the mess she'd made. Inside, Mason's backpack sat by the door, the zipper gaping open, his homework spilling out. I wanted to call him downstairs, to pull him onto my lap like when he was small and tell him none of this was real. That Nana would fix it. But I didn't, because I wasn't sure I could. They say mothers always find a way. But I'm starting to think sometimes love is just the rope you use to tie the noose around your own neck. And the worst part is you don't even feel it tighten until it's too late. They say courtrooms are places of truth. But what they don't tell you is how cold the truth feels when you're standing in a box and everyone's eyes are waiting for you to trip over your own story. The day of the hearing, the sun rose mean and bright, the kind of blue sky that feels cruel when you're about to walk into a room and let strangers decide if your love was real or just a debt unpaid. Heather met me on the courthouse steps. She looked polished, crisp navy suit, hair pinned up like a news anchor. I wished I felt as sturdy as she looked. I wore my best dress. The navy one with the tiny white flowers George always liked said it made me look like spring, no matter how gray my hair got. I thought about him all morning, how he'd hold my hand, squeeze my palm twice to say, "You're not alone." But he was gone, and my palm was empty. Rachel was already inside when we got there. She sat across the aisle, tapping her phone with that bored, self-satisfied look I knew too well. Beside her was her lawyer, a big man in an ill-fitting suit that still looked better than the second-hand blazer Heather found for me. She didn't look at me. Not once. Not even when the clerk called my name. We sat on opposite sides like enemies, her with her shiny binder and stack of printouts, me with a small folder Heather helped me piece together. Old photos of the boys on Christmas morning, a few scribbled grocery lists that said, lunch money for Mason, $10. Proof of nothing, really. Love doesn't come with receipts. When the judge came in, everyone rose. The room buzzed with that heavy hush you get when something awful is about to happen, but no one wants to be the first to say it. Rachel's lawyer was up first. His voice boomed like he was reading from a sermon. Asterisk. Your Honor, Miss Thomas seeks rightful compensation for 12 years of unpaid labor. The defendant, the grandmother, willingly took on childcare duties with an understanding, implied by repeated statements, that her daughter would get back on her feet. This was not a permanent gift, this was a service, one my client has been deprived of wages for. A service. It felt like someone took every bedtime story, every peanut butter sandwich I'd made when we were down to the last loaf of bread, and stamped a price tag on it. Like I'd run a daycare, not a home. Heather stood then. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the strain in it the way it wobbled around the edges. Your Honor, my client never asked for payment. There was no contract, no formal agreement. This was family helping family as millions of grandparents do every day. She provided a home, food, and love. That's not a debt. That's being a mother. I wanted to squeeze her hand, tell her she made it sound beautiful. But the judge just nodded, scribbling something down on his pad. Then it was my turn. The bailiff called my name. I stood knees trembling so badly I thought I'd fall. The oath tasted sour in my mouth. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth. Rachel's lawyer asked questions that felt like bee stings. Mrs. Simmons, did you ever discuss payment with your daughter? Number, did you ever tell her she'd need to pay you back? Number, I told her I'd help her until she was stable. I didn't think. So you acknowledge you used the phrase, until she got back on her feet? Well, yes, but I meant? No further questions, Your Honor. He said it like a slap. When Heather asked me to speak for myself, my words tumbled out like old soup. I told the judge about the boys' birthday parties, about the Christmas Rachel skipped when she said she was working but never brought home a paycheck, about the braces, the backpacks, the coats I bought from the clearance rack. I told him I did it because that's what mothers do, because family doesn't come with an invoice. Because when Rachel was small, I'd promised to keep her safe and I never stopped, even when it nearly broke me. I don't know if he heard me. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. The worst part was when they called Ben to testify. My sweet boy, my helper, my co-pilot at the grocery store, my tall grandson whose shoes are now bigger than his dreams. He sat there, hands clenched in his lap, eyes down. Rachel's lawyer made him read from a text message Rachel had saved one. I'd sent her late one night when I thought my heart would crack open. Rachel, you need to step up. I can't do this alone forever. I'm too tired. This isn't fair. Ben read it in a whisper. When he looked at me, his eyes were empty. He didn't see the woman who tied his skates when he was 5. He saw the problem. Mrs. Harris was there too. Of course she was. I spotted her in the back row, pretending she'd come to support both sides, but she looked like a cat waiting for the mouse to stop twitching. When they called a recess, I went to the bathroom just to breathe. I splashed water on my face, stared at the stranger in the mirror, the woman with thinning hair and a court badge pinned crooked to her chest. I thought about George again, how he would have told me not to let her push me around, how he would have called her bluff. But George wasn't here, and I didn't know how to be strong alone. Back in the courtroom, Rachel didn't look at me. She scrolled her phone, smirking at something her lawyer whispered. She laughed a short, sharp sound that made the bailiff look up like he might shush her. In that moment, I hated her. And I hated myself for not being able to stop loving her. When it was over for the day, the judge didn't decide anything. He just set another date, more forms, more proof, more time for Rachel to twist my love into debt. Heather squeezed my shoulder as I stood there, knees wobbling. We'll fight it, Carol, we will. But you need to be ready for the worst. Outside, the sky was still too bright. The sun felt like it was burning holes through my coat. When I got home, Mason was in the living room, his head buried in his tablet. He didn't look up when I called his name. Didn't say, "Hi, Nana." Upstairs, I heard Rachel's door slam shut. Her voice filtered through the floorboards, sharp and sweet at the same time. "Yeah, Mom's gonna cave, just a matter of time." She was laughing. They say courtrooms are for the truth. But I think the truth is just whatever hurts the most. And in my house now, the truth is this. Love doesn't matter when money's on the table. They say money can't buy love. But watching my daughter twist my love into a check with my name on it made me wonder if maybe they're wrong. Maybe it can't buy love, but it sure can drown it. The week after court, the letters started coming more often. Official, stiff envelopes that made my stomach twist every time I heard the mail slot clatter shut. Heather called them settlement proposals. I called them what they were, ultimatums. One night, she sat across from me at my kitchen table, the same table where I once braided Rachel's hair, where the boys used to draw superheroes and smear peanut butter across my clean tablecloth. She laid out the numbers like they were groceries we could price shop. They're willing to settle for $60,000 if you sign the house over. My hands shook around my teacup. Sign the house over and go where? Heather flinched. She was young, too young for my kind of mess. She'd never had a daughter twist a knife so deep. It's leverage, Carol. They think you'll cave. They're not sure they'd win outright, so they're trying to push you into settling. But if you lose in court, you could be forced to sell anyway. And you'd owe more with court costs. Sell my house, George's house. The house where we brought Rachel home in a yellow blanket. The house where the boys took their first steps, clinging to the arm of my worn-out recliner. I felt like I was drowning in my own kitchen. When Heather left, I sat at the table till dawn. The boys came down for breakfast and found me still there. Mason just looked at me eyes wide, backpack dangling off his shoulder. "You okay, Nana?" His voice was soft. But there was a wall there now, something I'd never felt from him before. I tried to smile. "Of course, baby. Go on, don't be late for the bus." Ben hovered at the fridge, rummaging for a juice box. He didn't look at me. Didn't say good morning. That day, I went to the bank. I asked the teller, a young woman with bright blue nails and a ring in her nose, how much I had left in savings. She clicked her tongue, tapped her keyboard. "Looks like about 12,000, ma'am." 12,000. After 42 years with George, after cashing out his pension, after paying for braces and shoes and backpacks and birthday cakes, 12,000. It felt like a bad joke. That night, Rachel cornered me by the stairs. She was dressed up, hair curled, makeup fresh, heels I knew she couldn't afford without me footing every other bill in this house. "Mom," she said, like she was doing me a kindness. Asterisk. "Just sign the papers, it's better for everyone." I laughed. A raw, ugly sound that made Mason flinch from the living room. "Better for who?" She crossed her arms. Asterisk. "For the boys. For me. For you, if you'd just stop being stubborn, you can rent a small place, you don't need all this space." I wanted to scream at her. Remind her who built these walls. Who patched the roof when she brought the boys home, crying about monsters under their beds. But the words died on my tongue. I was too tired to fight her shadow. Ben came home late that Friday, the scent of cigarettes and cheap cologne clinging to his hoodie. He slammed the door harder than he meant to. I asked him where he'd been. He shrugged. Asterisk. Out. Out where? He looked at me like I was the joke. Asterisk. "You don't get to ask me that anymore, Nana. You're not Mom." The words hit harder than a slap. Mrs. Harris stopped me at the mailbox the next day. Of course she did. Asterisk. "Carol, we're all praying for you. But maybe it's time to let it go? You know, Rachel's just trying to do what's best for her family." I wanted to shout, "I am her family," but the words stuck in my throat. They tasted like salt. That Sunday, I tried to talk to Mason. He was on the couch, knees pulled up, eyes glued to his phone. Asterisk. "Baby, you know Nana loves you more than anything, right?" He nodded, but didn't look up. Asterisk. "You know I'd never hurt you." His shoulders tensed. Asterisk. "Mom says you want us to be homeless." I pressed my hand to my chest, like I could hold my heart in. Asterisk. "No, sweetheart, I want you to stay. This is your home too." He looked at me then, and for a moment, I saw my little boy. But then his face closed up again. He turned back to his phone, the room filling with silence that tasted like betrayal. That night, I woke to a pain in my chest so sharp I thought, this is it. This is how it ends. I sat on the edge of my bed, the old Afghan George's mother made for us bunched in my fists. I thought about the settlement offer, about handing the keys to Rachel, letting her sell the house from under me. I thought about moving into a tiny apartment on the other side of town, where no one knew my name, where Mason and Ben would never come for Christmas, where the smell of George's aftershave didn't linger in the hall closet. And then I thought, what would George want me to do? He'd tell me not to give up. He'd tell me this house wasn't just wood and paint, it was our life, our story, our scars in the doorframe where Rachel's height was penciled in every birthday till she turned 15 and decided she was too old for it. He'd tell me I'm worth more than a price tag. When dawn broke, I called Heather. My voice shook, but my spine felt straighter than it had in months. Asterisk. Tell them I'm not signing. We'll see them in court. Heather was quiet for a beat. Then she said, Asterisk? Are you sure, Carol? This could drag on. You could lose more. I've already lost enough. I hung up and stood at the window, watching the sunrise pour over the garden George once tended with hands that smelled of soil and hope. I felt him there, just for a second. Like a whisper. Stand tall, Carol, even when they try to bury you. And I promised him right then and there, I'd stand as long as my legs would hold me. They say you can't put a price on love. My daughter did. But I won't pay it. They say you can't lose what you never owned, but nobody talks about how it feels to lose what you built with your bare hands, brick by brick, promise by promise. The morning of the final hearing, the sky was low and gray, the kind of cold that seeps through your coat and settles in your bones. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the ring of steam rising from my coffee. The house was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, each second marching me closer to the moment I'd stand in front of strangers and have my life measured like an unpaid bill. Heather picked me up herself. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. She didn't ask me if I was sure. She didn't need to. By now she knew there was nothing left to be unsure about. Rachel was already there when we walked in. She wore a blazer that looked expensive, but it didn't fit quite right around her shoulders, too stiff, like she was wearing someone else's skin. She didn't look at me. She hadn't for weeks. Not since I refused the settlement. Not since I told her if she wanted my house, she'd have to drag me out by the roots. Ben was there too, slouched in the back row of the courtroom, his hoodie pulled low, eyes fixed on his phone. He didn't look up when I passed him. I wanted to reach out, to tuck that stubborn cowlick behind his ear like I used to when he was 5. But the boy I knew was gone, tucked behind the lawyer's folders and his mother's easy lies. When the judge came in, everyone stood. I could feel my knees wobble under my best dress. I gripped the edge of the table so tight my knuckles turned white. Rachel's lawyer went first. Again. He made his arguments sound neat, reasonable, like putting me out of my house was just a matter of balancing the family ledger. Asterisk, 12 years of unpaid services, Your Honor. Implied promises of compensation. Miss Thomas has suffered financial hardship due to her mother's refusal to formalize the arrangement. Hardship. I thought about the nights she stumbled in at 3 a.m., her hair tangled, makeup smeared, my arms full of her children, shushing them back to sleep so they wouldn't see their mother fall apart. If that was hardship, I wondered what they'd call my life. Heather stood next. She didn't have fancy words. She had a voice that trembled when she said, "Family is not a business transaction." She showed the judge photos. The twins in Halloween costumes. My handwritten notes on the fridge. "Remember dentist appointment for Ben, Nana loves you?" It all looked so small under the fluorescent lights, like scraps of a life nobody would value but me. Then it was my turn. The clerk called my name. I rose, heart beating like a trapped bird. I told myself, stand up straight, Carol. If they're going to take your house, at least let them see your spine. Heather asked me why I did it, why I'd opened my door 12 years ago, why I hadn't asked for a cent. My voice cracked like an old radio. Because she was my daughter, I said. Asterisk. Because they were my grandsons. Because George would have done the same. Because family means you don't put a price on love. Rachel's lawyer stood, one eyebrow cocked like a fox. Asterisk. Mrs. Simmons, you once texted your daughter saying, "I can't do this forever. You need to step up. It's not fair." Wouldn't you say that implies you expected payment? I shook my head. My hands twisted the hem of my dress. Asterisk. I was tired. I wanted help. I wanted her to be their mother again, not my landlord. The room was so quiet I could hear Ben shifting in his chair, the soft squeak of Mason's sneakers where he sat next to Rachel. Rachel wouldn't look at me. She just stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Once, her eyes flicked to mine, but there was nothing there. Not hate, not pity, just emptiness. The judge called a short recess before his decision. I stepped into the hallway, the courthouse walls pressing close. I pressed my hand to the cool marble, trying to remember how to breathe. Ben came out behind me. He stood there, hoodie still up, eyes flicking anywhere but my face. "Nana," he mumbled. I turned. For a second, hope bloomed in my chest. Asterisk, Ben, honey? But the words died when he lifted his eyes. Asterisk. Mom says it's better this way. We'll have money. A new place. It won't matter if you lose this house. My throat went dry. Asterisk. This is your home too. He shrugged. Asterisk. Not anymore. He turned away before I could say another word. When we filed back in, The judge's eyes looked tired, like he'd rather be anywhere but here, dissecting the wreckage of a family that used to laugh around birthday cakes and Easter egg hunts. He spoke slowly, carefully. Each word dropped like a stone in my gut. He said there was no contract, no written agreement. He said there was a long-standing familial arrangement, but that money had never changed hands. He said Rachel's claim for back wages was untenable under state law. But then he paused, and the next words cracked through me like thunder. Asterisk. However, the court recognizes the financial hardship presented by both parties. Therefore, I am ordering a mediation for the sale or refinancing of the home so that Miss Thomas may receive a fair share of the equity she claims to have contributed to. In other words, I didn't owe her my time, but the house? The house was up for grabs. Rachel didn't smile. She didn't need to. The slight tilt of her chin was enough. She'd won something, even if she didn't get it all. Heather squeezed my hand, whispering, "We can fight the mediation. It's not over yet." But I knew better. When the gavel fell, I felt something leave me like a door slamming shut behind my ribs. Rachel walked past me on her way out, the boys trailing behind her. Mason glanced at me, eyes wide, confused, a child stuck in a war he didn't ask for. Rachel didn't stop. Didn't hug me. Didn't say goodbye. In the parking lot, I sat in Heather's car for a long while, staring at my house key, turning it over in my palm like a relic. I thought about George, about every nail he'd hammered, every birthday cake he'd cut in our little kitchen. The house might not survive this. Maybe I wouldn't either. But when I stepped out into the cold, I realized something. Rachel didn't get everything. She didn't get my soul. She didn't get my story. She didn't get the hush I'll keep in my chest, the secret that I gave them every last ounce of myself, and I would again. They say you can't lose what you never owned. But I owned this love. I still do, even if all I have left to show for it is 4 empty walls and a door that doesn't always close all the way anymore.